The Obama administration sees gender identity as the new civil rights struggle, but is preventing biological males from using the ladies' restroom truly equivalent to the injustices of racial segregation? This is an issue fraught with confusion and with danger. Find out why on this special program.
It is not up to the school district to determine the time our daughters encounter a member of the opposite sex while in a state of undress.
What they wanted was full access to the bathroom of the opposite sex from when they were born.
President Obama's decree to the public schools in the nation is turning our schools into battlegrounds for political agendas.
The Creator made two sexes.
I always felt that I should have been a girl.
The Obama administration is out of control on this issue.
Over the past few years, a powerful movement has taken shape. This movement denies biological reality and argues that gender is a function of choice, of personal preference, and it seeks to punish all who disagree. On this special program, we bring truth to bear on the perplexing and tangled notions of so-called gender identity. You will meet someone who suffered serious harm as a result of this movement, and you will find out how to bring sanity and common sense back to an issue mired in confusion and error. We begin by investigating the effort to demonize all who fail to embrace the transgender movement. Our own Dr. Jerry Newcomb has more.
If you're born a man, you should go to the men's bathroom. If you're born a woman, you should go to the women's bathroom.
When the federal government comes in and uses your children as pawns to push their radical agenda on the states, then the states need to fight back.
It is an attack on biblical Christianity.
The whole controversy in North Carolina began when the City Council of Charlotte decided in early 2016 to adopt a very open bathroom measure.
Charlotte passed a law that would have allowed men to go into the women's bathrooms and women to go into the men's bathrooms. But not just bathrooms, it included showers, locker rooms, any private spaces like that.
Had it stood, it would have forced businesses, both public and private, and churches to be forced to allow people to use the bathroom, the restroom that they sexually identify with, regardless to their biological sex.
The state warned Charlotte that their proposed bill was unconstitutional and would be opposed by the governor and legislature, but the city council passed it into law anyway.
They passed a very radical ordinance, and they said that not only did you have to allow folks that are transgender to use the restroom facility, shower facility, locker room facility that they identified with, they went so far as to say, if you put names on bathrooms like male and female, man and woman, that's called sex discrimination. So effectively opening up bathrooms and locker rooms and showers to men, to prey on women.
And then the law also impacted businesses that contract with the city of Charlotte by requiring them to adopt broad sweeping LGBT policies just in order to maintain their contracts.
We had to call a special session, get in, make sure we got business done, strike it down before the ordinance went into effect on April 1st.
Thus, the state passed House Bill 2, restricting people to the bathroom of their biology. This new law sparked a firestorm of controversy.
So far, the state has taken a financial hit from the loss of conventions and concerts like Bruce Springsteen and Pearl Jam.
When we passed House Bill 2, the media came out instantly and said this is the most anti-transgender, anti-LGBT bill in the history of America, discrimination against the LGBT community. It's unfortunate because we've never created our laws based on people's feelings and identities, that's a very slippery slope to go down in America because there's no end to it. I mean, you can identify or feel like you're anything at any given moment, and who is to say that you're not? I called and talked to multiple CEOs and asked them, have you read the bill? And they said no. But they also, several of them told me that they were actually fearful of the Human Rights Campaign coming against them.
Even the President of the United States decided to punish North Carolina for the law by suing the state and threatening to withhold millions of federal dollars.
We are here to announce a significant law enforcement action regarding North Carolina's Public Facilities Privacy and Security Act, also known as House Bill 2.
We have the responsibility as North Carolinians to protect the right to privacy and right to safety of women and old children in North Carolina.
The battle of the bathrooms, it's honestly common sense that there shouldn't be a man in the bathroom with me.
The heart of the controversy turns on a new understanding of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Title IX of 1972, which prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex. Does that now include prohibiting discrimination on the basis of gender identity? Critics note that that would open up Pandora's box because supposedly there are dozens of genders today, and because that can change from day to day or minute to minute.
At the last count, we had about 60 genders, and even the folks in the transgender community say that number is growing quite rapidly.
The Creator made two sexes. It's indisputable, male and female. And that is something that no one can argue with. It doesn't matter to me how one may sexually identify, doesn't matter what one may think in their minds. God made the human race male and female.
Immediately the left came out and said that North Carolina is this giant discriminatory state, where people are hateful and they're bigots and all these types of things along the way.
In July, the NBA even announced they would move their 2017 All-Star game out of Charlotte because of the law.
It's unfortunate because really nothing changed in North Carolina before and after Charlotte's ordinance. What we had to do is codify what our law already said.
North Carolina is rated in the top 5 businesses across the country for business. It has one of the best climates for job creation and for economic stability.
They lie about House Bill 2 and what it does. No one is denied any rights except factory-made women and children who may be exposed to men in the ladies' room. And as a man, to be honest with you, sir, I don't want a woman, whether she thinks she's a man or not, in the men's room.
Despite it all, North Carolina remains strong in the conviction that there should be no men in the ladies' room or the girls' locker room.
We've heard from a number of ladies who have been molested in bathrooms who say this is a horrible thing for women.
The transgender community makes up 0.3 of 1% of the population. So 0.3% of the population is transgender. And we are being directed, not even asked, but directed by the Obama administration to make this huge accommodation for 0.3% of the population. My question for the Obama administration is, what about the other 99.7% of the population? What about their privacy and their safety?
Not only have some said that HB2 is like Jim Crow, but no less than the Attorney General Loretta Lynch of the United States of America has said that, and the President of the United States.
I'm going to sing a little song. My name's Jim Crow.
Who or exactly what was Jim Crow? Initially, it was a character created in 1832 by Thomas D. Rice in blackface for his minstrel show. The offensive portrayal of Jim Crow was no laughing matter. Eventually, the name came to represent the entire system of apartheid-like laws after the Civil War to keep blacks separate and decidedly not equal. They couldn't vote. They couldn't get good jobs. They were systematically treated as second-class citizens. In some cases, they even faced violence or death.
And in the old days, when the NAACP was founded, its total mission was to bring a sense of racial reconciliation, starting in a time where blacks were literally being lynched. I feel very much that the civil rights movement was hijacked, continues to be hijacked by the LGBT community.
There's a distortion from the left about the civil rights era and Dr. King's plan and Dr. King's message. There was not one eternal truth that Dr. King tried to overturn. He was a preacher. Dr. King used the scriptures on his behalf to make his case. And yet what we're seeing with this whole Transforming America agenda is the opposite. We're seeing truth turned on its head.
This is not the first time that we have seen discriminatory responses to historic moments of progress for our nation. We saw it in the Jim Crow laws.
The civil rights struggle was based on gross injustices. We came out of a civil war, Jim Crow, grinding oppression based on a skin color, which is absolutely irrelevant when it comes to a person's character. Bathrooms are based on biological realities that are relevant. So we don't see urinals in women's bathrooms.
It's not a good practice for a man to use a lady's bathroom and vice versa. So to demagogue the issue, to try and to make a emotional, nonsensical connection to a very ugly part of our past is horrible. North Carolina is ranked as the second best state in the United States of America for African Americans when it comes to employment and business.
It was not so very long ago that states, including North Carolina, had other signs above restrooms, water fountains, and on public accommodations, keeping people out based on a distinction without a difference.
She was referring to black only and white only signs above bathrooms, which is an amazingly shameful comment. She's being very intellectually dishonest with all the people viewing there, because the color of a person's skin, the pigment of their skin, has nothing at all to do with what bathroom somebody uses. We got rid of Jim Crow laws. They were nefarious in their very creation, and so we got rid of them. But you know what we didn't get rid of at the same time? We didn't get rid of signs on bathrooms that said male and female. Why? Because a person's biological sex has everything to do with what bathroom they go into.
Race has nothing to do with what goes on in the bathroom, okay? Doesn't matter what color you are, has nothing to do with how you use the bathroom. Anatomy does, biology does.
Critics of the Obama administration's policy to try and force open bathrooms in schools and institutions across the country note that this is all based on feelings of identity, not facts of anatomy.
Transgenderism is a relatively new ideology that says that a person's sex is not based on their biology, that what is put on their birth certificate is something effectively arbitrary, and it's something that could be changed. So someone could identify as a sex that does not correspond to their actual physical biology. So it's entirely subjective as a concept.
When God made male and female, He made us a reflection of Himself. When you say that that's inaccurate, there is no such thing as male and there's no such thing as female, what you're really saying is there's no such thing as God. There is a distinction between the Creator and the created, and He reflected that in male and female. And this battle is a whole lot bigger than whether a young woman goes in a bathroom and there's a grown man standing in there who has gotten himself confused in his gender identity to where he actually thinks he's a woman too.
The end game of the LGBT movement is unclear, but we've seen the trajectory. We've seen it move from marriage redefinition to redefinition to what it means to be a man and a woman. This may be the logical conclusion of that movement, which essentially says everything is absolutely subjective. You are whatever you want to be, whenever you want to be, but not only that, everyone else must affirm your chosen identity. And if not, government will come after you, big business will come after you, you will be shamed, you will be excluded, and you will be discriminated against, pushed out of the public square. That is not a vision of tolerance, that is a vision of intolerance. But unfortunately, that's what we've seen from the left, but there is hope in pushing it back if people get activated, people become aware and know that this is what is happening in America today.
In our day, anyone holding a traditional biblical view of sex and gender faces intense pressure to conform to a new cultural orthodoxy. Only a few short years ago, Any argument to let biological men use the women's locker room because they self-identified as female would have been branded absurd. Today, this is the settled doctrine of progressive liberals everywhere, even though it can and does harm people, as you will see a bit later. But at root, what is this gender issue all about? Is it rooted in science and modern knowledge? Our own John Rabe takes a closer look.
Non-binary is when a person chooses to identify as neither male nor female, usually taking on different pronouns like she, her, jim, or z, zer, zim. Gender fluid can also fit into the spectrum of gender identities. A person who is gender fluid changes their gender identity that best fits with how they're feeling, changing from male to female.
Part of the problem with the transgender movement is it's coming from an essentially Gnostic view of the human person, the ancient heresy that we saw happening that the early church had to confront. The idea that myself and my body are two distinct entities, and that who I am is disconnected from who I am bodily.
A post-Christian culture in many ways becomes a post-reality culture. I mean, we're denying basics of reality, even now some basics of reality that are observable, you know, things like gender. I mean, that's an observable fact in biology and to the human eye, and yet these are things that we are denying.
Transgender people are people whose identity don't match the one that they were assigned at birth, and they may or may not have surgery to get their body in line with their identity.
But the gender box is getting even bigger.
Though the term gender is now a common one, it might surprise you to know that the category of gender as applied to human beings has only been around since the 1970s. It originated not in the sciences, but in radical university English departments. Before then, we spoke in terms of the sexes, male and female, rooted in biology. So-called gender theorists wanted to do away with the biological distinctives. The basic idea is that while sex is biologically determined, gender is the societal role we play, and that it's fluid. It can be adopted, shed, or changed in any way one wants.
Gender fluid and genderqueer people identify as two or more genders.
And may move between masculine and feminine presentations. All these words can be dizzying, and we're just scratching the surface.
Dr. Julie Hamilton is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
We live in a culture that emphasizes perceptions, sometimes even more so than reality. And I think that's probably been the postmodern influence. With postmodernism, you have this idea that there is no reality, it's all just perceptions. But really God defines us, and I think that it's just an unfortunate place that we've arrived in our culture.
This has manifested itself in odd and even silly ways. For instance, a few years ago, the media was full of stories about a pregnant man.
What is a man? What is a woman? Journey of a pregnant man.
Thomas, not Nancy, is the one who is pregnant. I'm gonna let you take that in a minute.
But Oprah's audience need not have been so surprised. The so-called pregnant man was born a woman, had female chromosomes and organs, and had even competed in beauty contests. She was simply a woman calling herself a man. But the basic laws of biology had not been overturned.
We are born either male or female. Now, how we perceive ourselves is what some have referred to as gender identity. So gender identity is a person's perception of themselves in terms of their gender. So it's a boy's sense of his masculinity, a girl's sense of her femininity. And so gender identity is perception. That perception can be accurate or it can be not accurate.
But the push to let one decide gender for oneself has led to a new facet of political correctness. Cedric Crenshaw is an Illinois mom fighting against transgender public school locker rooms and bathrooms.
At one of my school board meetings, I referred to transgender individuals or transgender students as gender confused, to me, which is a more accurate term for a child. But in a discussion that I had with some other people who were proponents of transgender use of opposite sex locker rooms and restrooms, they were offended that I used the term gender confused. And so here I am, I'm an adult. I can think, I can read, I can reason, but I have to be told that no, you can't use that word, you can't use that phrase.
The Thomas More Society is representing Chicago parents in a lawsuit about the bathrooms. Jocelyn Floyd is an attorney on the case.
The progressive left in the ACLU and the Department of Education and Obama's administration keep insisting that the science is settled. Science supports transgender. This is false. Where science is settled, it supports that transgenderism is a mental disorder. In any other situation where the brain and the body are at odds with each other, the typical solution in psychology and psychiatry is to treat the thoughts to bring them to match reality. An example of this is anorexia. Anorexia is a type of body dysmorphia. You are so upset with your body that you can no longer see objective reality. You have anorexics on the borderline of starvation who look in the mirror and see a fat person. Nobody would say, all right, you see a fat person, I'm gonna help you fix that. Let's get you on a diet plan, let me get your exercise going, I'll be your coach, I'll support you. Nobody suggests that as a treatment for anorexia. We say, your brain is lying to you. Let us work on fixing your thoughts so that you can see reality and accept reality and get to a place where your brain and your body are healthy.
Ultimately, America's gender confusion is not about science and reality at all. It's about worldview.
A secular society assumes that the world is one of our own making that we invite God into. The Christian worldview begins with a very fundamental premise. We live in God's world, He doesn't live in ours. And those are two completely different worldviews. They're fundamental assumptions of two completely different worldviews, because that changes things like morality, it changes things like authority. And when you can get to the bottom of where these ideas come from, then I think it gives us an insight into why people believe what they do and why they say what they do.
As you have just seen, the modern gender movement has little to do with science or medicine and much to do with ideology and sexual anarchy. Later in this program, you will meet some people who are fighting back against this agenda for the safety of their children. But first, see for yourself how devastating the confusion fostered by this movement can be. Meet a man who tried to live as a woman for years, aided and abetted by doctors and psychiatrists, only to discover that it was a disastrous error in judgment.
I don't ever want to stand in front of anybody's happiness.
He didn't want to be who he was. My heart goes out to him. He's struggling.
Walt Heyer, originally from the Los Angeles area, can relate to that kind of struggle.
I always felt that I should have been a girl, and that I would get more attention, I would get more love, I would be liked better, life would be better. I thought that I was born that way.
But in reality, some bad seeds were sown in his childhood.
When my dad would take me over to Grandma's house and drop me off, for whatever reason, I will never know. We started this routine where she was cross-dressing me in the old closet of the old house. And this got started. And it became a game and our secret. I was getting affirmed as a female. And I knew that when I was a female, my grandma liked me. She fussed over me. She made me a dress. I never got that kind of affirmation as a boy. I convinced my mom to get me a nice cowboy outfit. We were going to go out to a restaurant. My dad says, get that silly outfit off. And I wasn't going to change it. So we got to the restaurant, and he just spent time berating me about what I looked like. In 1955, what happened that was really pivotal for me was I'd been struggling with all these feelings, and all of a sudden the headlines, Christine Jorgensen, man soldier becomes woman.
That I am more of a woman than I am a man.
And so then I realized, wow, you can actually change from one gender to the other. So here, all of a sudden now I'm realizing, well, maybe I'm one of those. Maybe I'm like Christine Jorgensen, and that's what I need.
Still, Walt kept his feelings to himself.
I got married and fostered 2 great kids, and married successfully for 17 years, and eventually became an executive with a large automobile company in the United States. And I rose to pretty high achievement in that company. But by this time I was struggling, trying to cope with my early childhood issues, coping with alcoholism, and trying to work the job, be the father. Some of the ways that I sort of, what I called, relieved the stress of what was going on internally with me, I would go get a motel room, and I would cross-dress and go down into the local bars.
That was in San Francisco. Walt finally saw a leading specialist who dealt with issues of changing gender.
He said, you're suffering from gender identity disorder, gender dysphoria, and he said the cure for this is to have hormone therapy, which he said, I can find you a doctor that can give you the hormones, and then gender reassignment surgery. And so I went in April of 1983 and had the surgery and changed to Laura Jensen officially. And I was working as Walt at the time, so I had a dual identity. I was happy originally.
Despite the initial euphoria, getting the sex change operation proved disastrous to Walt in the long run.
The devastation that occurred as a result of that is just beyond description. Loss of family, loss of relationship with many of the people in my family, divorce, total financial loss. I was bankrupt. I was homeless for a while.
So Walt Heyer, going through life as Laura Jensen, had found things were much worse off for him than before the sex change operation. He even tried to commit suicide, and alcoholism was consuming him. He began to see counselors, one of whom told him he just needed to say goodbye forever to Walt and hello forever to Laura. But real change came through the help of a loving church and some loving Christian people.
When I sat down with Jeff and told him about my life and what had happened, I said, you're not going to try to change me back to Walt, are you? Because I'm liking being Laura. And he says, no. He says, my job is just to love you. He said, God's job is to change you. And so he said, with that, he said, I'll just love you, and the people in the church will love you until God decides that you need to be changed. I was redeemed in a prayer when the Lord came to me and reached out to me, and I actually saw myself as a little baby during that prayer, and he reached out and put his arms under me as a little baby, pulled me in, and he said, you will be safe with me forever. And at that point, the Lord redeemed and restored my life. I knew that that was the love that I'd been trying to get all my life. I didn't get it from Grandma, who wanted to make me somebody else, Dad, who I loved but struggled with me as a cowboy. Finally, there was the Lord who came and says, I'm taking you, and I'm redeeming you, I'm restoring you, and you're healed.
Today, Walt Heyer writes books and counsels people all over the world on this subject, reaching out to them through his website, sexchangeregret.com.
The surgery never can address the psychological and emotional issues that transgenders suffer from with their identity. It can't do it because they're depressed. You can't cure depression with cutting off body parts or adding body parts or changing a body configuration. The TV shows today, primetime content on ABC for LGBT and transgenderism is over 50% content. So we're pushing, this whole thing, we're making it glamorous. What they don't see and what they don't understand is the horrible pain, the broken lives of my ex-wife, the broken life of my life, a broken career. I mean, there's so many things that I would have preferred to do with my life than to end up, so broken by surgical change that now here I am, the Lord's using me to bring the word out and try to help other people prevent them from suicide or an unnecessary gender reassignment surgery. That's my mission today.
Despite transgenderism's lack of basis in science, and despite the damage it does to people like Walt Heyer, The Obama administration has gone on a crusade to force public schools to open bathrooms and locker rooms based not on biological sex, but on self-perceived gender identity. And they have threatened schools refusing to comply with the loss of federal funding. Thankfully, for some brave parents, letting boys into their daughters' locker rooms is simply a step too far. Jerry Newcomb takes you to Chicago, where dozens of families have filed suit against the local school district.
Peaceful Palatine, Illinois. Hardly the place one would expect a contentious battle over the local high school girls' restrooms and showers.
No school should impose a policy like this against the will of so many parents.
We have a student who is transgender. He is a boy and wants to be a girl and has requested access to the bathrooms and the locker rooms.
Young ladies should not have to change or go to the restroom next to a young man.
Unfortunately, the Obama administration says no. When the federal government says we're going to take away $6, $7, $8 million of your federal funding, if you don't comply, schools tend to do what the federal government tells them to do.
The goal of the lawsuit is to restore the privacy.
Our schools should not be a place for social experiments. And that's exactly what the president is pushing. He's pushing a political agenda.
The Obama administration is trying to force school districts across the country to adopt open bathroom policies in order to accommodate transgenders. And now, some 50 families in the Chicago suburb of Palatine have decided to fight back through a major lawsuit. To them, the core concerns are the privacy and safety of their children while at school.
Our community became aware back in October of last year that the Federal Department of Education was trying to demand that our school district allow a biological male into the girls' locker room at our local high school.
No restrictions whatsoever. He's a biological boy. In the old days, we wouldn't have to say biological boy. We'd say he was a boy. But he came to the view that he was, in fact, a female. That's how he identified himself, contrary to physical fact, and that he should be free to go into the dressing room as and when and in whatever way he pleased.
As a parent at the high school and as somebody who attends the school board meetings, I was very shocked that this was happening. We hadn't heard anything about this.
There's something fundamentally wrong with allowing that child to then say, well, I feel like I'm the opposite gender, and so I want you to treat me this way and I want you to allow me to go into these specific places.
Originally, the school district stood up for the rights of the privacy of all the students and was pushing back against the Department of Education. But then the Department of Education did an investigation, and as a part of their findings, they declared that refusing access to the girls' locker room is sex discrimination under Title IX. And if the school did not give this student access to the girls' locker rooms, they would take away all of their federal funding, which amounts to about $6 million a year.
What ended up happening is December of last year in a school board meeting, we had about 400 people attend the school board meeting. About 40 people were allowed to speak. 90% of them, I would say, were in favor of privacy for the girls. But our school board, unfortunately, did vote on a 5-2 vote to allow access to the girls' locker room.
The concerned parents in Palatine felt that they had no recourse, so they filed a lawsuit to prevent a biological male from entering the girls' locker and restrooms. The lawsuit is a joint project of the Thomas More Society and the Alliance Defending Freedom.
My oldest daughter is a FREM graduate. A biological male who identifies as female walked in on her in the swimming locker room. She was very upset by the intense invasion of her privacy.
The goal of the lawsuit in Palatine is to reestablish the right to privacy for all students, not for a few, but for all students. Everyone can change in a place that is consistent with their actual biological gender, and for folks who are uncomfortable with that, they can get their own private changing rooms.
Perhaps the greatest tragedy of all this is that permanent damage is being done to help solve a temporary problem.
When you look at statistics of children who have expressed a desire or a feeling that they actually should be the opposing sex, between 87 and 99% of them grow out of it by the time they're done with puberty.
We have objective means to determine whether someone is a male or female. It comes down to your DNA, we have physical anatomy. It's very simple to do, and it's objective and it's scientific. We're teaching children that objective facts don't matter. Skip over the facts and accept this. So that's a lie.
The policies even disallow the government from inquiring about the bona fides of whether they're being truthful about that profession. You can't ask for any kind of medical records, you can't ask for anything. You just have to take their self-profession as fact and start allowing access.
One of the great concerns of all this is to protect the safety and privacy of victims of sex abuse.
One of the main storylines in this whole dispute that's not talked about much is sex abuse survivors. Women who have suffered sexual abuse and rape and assault in our culture. The answer is we have these kinds of separated facilities for men and women to protect against this kind of stuff.
Already, the school's open bathroom policy has some parents rethinking their options.
We have heard from several families directly who are now not sending their children to Fremd High School or to District 211 schools because of this.
It never ceases to amaze me what the progressive lefts in our country want to demand of us, and there is no compromise on their side. We are the ones that are bringing a compromise solution that protects everybody, because we say we can accommodate the people that struggle with these issues while protecting everybody else. But the leftists, the Obama administration says no. There's one uniform answer to this, and that is that everybody has to have their rights violated to serve the interests of this very small minority of people.
You've seen the reality shows featuring the likes of Bruce Jenner, who now calls himself Caitlyn. And you've heard the news stories about entertainers and even the NBA boycotting North Carolina because of its law keeping biological males out of public women's restrooms. But did you know that gender isn't even a scientific or medical concept and was never applied to human roles until the 1970s? Did you know that despite all these cultural accommodations, a staggering 41% of transgendered people attempt to kill themselves at some point? This is a rate 10 times higher than the general population. The consequences of this cultural insanity are very real. As you've learned on this program, framing transgender issues as the new civil rights struggle is absurd, and people like Walt Heyer have been seriously damaged by the fact-free, politically correct view in the media and in academia.
The left is pushing a subjective view of gender identity, absolutely divorced from biology. You can be what you want to be. You could be gender nonconforming. You could be agender. You could be male, female, or some combination thereof. There's actual federal guidance that says you could be some combination of male or female based on your subjective internal sense. You don't have to get a doctor's note. You don't have to change your birth certificate. You don't have to have surgery. You don't have to take drugs. You don't have to present in a certain way. It's just you are whatever you say you are. And that's a radical reinterpretation of what it means to be a man or a woman. And the federal government has no business even taking a position on that question.
Who would have thought just 10 years ago that we would have to talk to our 4-year-olds about a variety of gender choices, especially when they go into the bathroom? Who would have thought that we would come to the place that even in an apartment store, your 15-year-old daughter is at risk by going into the ladies' room? They've crossed the line, and Barack Obama has expanded government to places that it should not go, and so the church now has a decision to make about whether we should even have a Department of Education.
The president has shown by his decree to all public schools to accommodate these transgender children that he is in fact a bully. He doesn't care about the laws. The law is very clear concerning Title IX, and no school district has ever lost federal funding for protecting the privacy of children. And so he's shown that he doesn't care about the law, and he's willing to threaten schools with loss of federal funding if they don't go along with his political agenda. That's exactly what a bully does. A bully threatens with violence or some type of force in order to get their way. That's wrong.
In the first book of the Bible and in its first chapter, we read these words: God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. God then blessed and instructed them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. These are the most basic truths about humanity, and these truths are twisted, perverted, and ultimately broken by the cultural celebration of homosexuality and transgenderism. It makes fulfilling God's design for us literally impossible. And as you have seen, for those entangled in it, their constant companions are trouble, heartache, and brokenness. We must have and show compassion to those ensnared in this cultural delusion. Yet, the answer to sexual brokenness is not accommodation. There is no compassion in enabling others to continue living in a destructive and sinful lie. The only hope for all who desire to be free from the condemnation and power of our sins, sexual and otherwise, is the gospel of Jesus Christ. He died a cruel death, bearing the wrath of God in our place. But he rose from the dead in power and in great glory. And for those who believe and trust in him, we are washed from our sins and made whole again. This is the power of the cross. Christ became sin for us. Thank you for joining us on this special program, which is part of our continuing series on the road back to sanity. Stay tuned for future specials on socialism in September and on our First Amendment freedoms in October. May God bless you, and may God bless America.
This has been a production of D. James Kennedy Ministries.